Hey there friends, welcome back to the Dead Game Society. Today we're going to be looking at another personal favourite of mine in a game which sits very near and dear to my heart, Dark Souls 2. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard of Dark Souls. It's the game that every other game with a slightly higher than average difficulty curve gets compared to, and you're probably aware that it's notorious for its challenging gameplay. And if you didn't know that, well, now you do. We'll talk about the real difficulty of the game later, but for now, let's get into the session. Now, before we get into the heat of the video, I want to point out that I've already played this game a bunch of times, and chances are I won't be dying all too much, though it's inevitable it'll happen a few times. In fact, it's important to note that apart from Demon's Souls, because I never owned a PS3, I've beaten all of the Souls games, including Bloodborne and Sekiro. While that's not something that will get me front of the line in a nightclub, in the gaming world, that's a badge of honour as far as I'm concerned. These games throw a lot of shit at you. I consider you a brother in arms if you've trudged through the Souls series and lived to tell the tale. If you want to experience this game for yourself, go and play the game and then come back when you're done. This is your last warning. This game has a lot of environmental storytelling and I'd be remiss to rob anybody who wants to experience it for themselves. Are they gone? Okay, cool. One more thing to note is that I have played this game numerous times, but in order to make this video as entertaining as possible, I'm going to be replicating my first ever playthrough of the game, making all of the same errors and seeing how much I can get away with now that I'm something of a Souls veteran. Starting the game, we get an introduction, and I think now is the time we briefly run over the game's story just so you have some context as to what's going on. Have you ever listened to a really great song for the first time and then had it on loop until eventually you hated it, but then after a long time of not hearing it, you'll listen to it again and it's just as great as you first remembered? That's kind of how the story of Dark Souls goes. Dark Souls 2 is set in the world of Drangleic, a world out of place and out of time. You play as a traveller in this strange and expansive land, a man or woman out to find a cure for the undead curse, a plague-like affliction which harbours the coming of a dark age and is destined to sweep the land. This affliction is inevitable and can only be staved off temporarily by linking the fire. This curse causes degradation of the mind and body, shown both in-game as your character's appearance shifts dramatically to appear husk-like in pigment, and in the opening sequence, where we are met with a harrowing visage of a woman holding a baby, her face melting away from consciousness as the scene fades. The only way to sustain this curse and buy yourself some time is to harvest the souls of your enemies, all of which are mindless shells who will blindly attack you, themselves having succumbed to the same illness. As I've just mentioned, the appearance of this curse is not a one-time thing. The world is built on a cycle of fire and darkness. It's not clear how large the gap between the games is in each cycle, but it's implied to be hundreds, if not thousands of years, and each time the fire, which is basically the life force of the world, begins to fade, it is the destiny of one chosen individual to defeat its defenders and rekindle it. Each time the fire is linked and the Age of Dark is put off another few centuries, it gets weaker and weaker, but as is implied in the cutscenes and dialogue throughout the games, even if the Age of Dark comes, one day the fire will once again begin to burn, and the cycle will renew. There, that's about all the context you need for now. This opening cinematic is a visual treat, and I definitely prefer its more personal approach than the cinematic of Dark Souls 1, which was more about the overall story rather than your character's personal journey.
Like a moth drawn to a flame, your wings will burn in anguish, time after time. For that is your fate, the fate of the cursed.
We fall down an abyss and wake up sometime later in the middle of some sort of platform. Not too far from here is a house where some old crones remind us that our curse will one day take over our mind and body, and that we're not the first to come here looking for some sort of solution. Oddly enough, this sort of gives the game a bit of a narrative excuse for replaying it, and ties you in with the other poor players who went through Drangleic and failed. Regardless, we make our character and get restored back to our whole human form by using a human effigy. Though, don't be fooled, we're still cursed. This is not a solution, only a temporary fix. As soon as we die, it's back to zombie form. We make our way through to the other side of the cave we find ourselves in, and look at that horizon line. Gorgeous. We find a small town named Majulaar, which acts as the hub world for the game, and the music here is so peaceful that I actually used to listen to this to go to sleep to sometimes. We make our way to our first proper bonfire, where we meet a woman looking stoically off into the distance. She speaks to us in riddles about becoming the next monarch and tells us to seek out the king of the land. Why? Fuck knows, but that's not important. We have a goal and we're going to stick to it. Now, from here we sort of hit a little bit of a problem. From Majulaar, there are 3 direct entrances to different areas, and only one of them is the air quotes intended route. Dark Souls 1 had the same thing, where you could get yourself into an area not intended until much later in the game, where the enemies are far too difficult to beat for a beginner player. I just so happened to be one of those players, and funnily enough, I made the same mistake on my first time through Dark Souls 2 as well. So, that's where we're going to go first. We trot along to a place called Hyde's Tower of Flame, and I have to say, this area is so nice. Sadly, I'd say roughly the first half of the game is like this, and the rest of it gets pretty... I don't know. We'll talk more about that later. For now, we come across our first enemy, a giant knight holding a big sword. He's pretty tough to take down considering we haven't leveled into anything yet, but this is all another day at the office for me, and I can take him down pretty easily. We also see some knights soaking up the sun, and here is where I think we should pause for a sec. If you're a Dark Souls fan, you'll know that there are actually 2 versions of this game. There's the standard game and the Scholar of the First Sin edition, which includes all of the DLC and makes some significant tweaks. One of those tweaks is something of a facelift, but we're going to talk about that later. For now, the latter is the version I'm playing. However, my first ever playthrough of the game was on the console with the standard version, and they pulled the rug out from under my feet a little bit here, because they've totally changed the spawn locations for a bunch of the enemies. In the base game, the knight we just saw spawns once in a few different areas, and to the best of my knowledge, never respawns once you kill them. As you encounter more and more of them throughout the game, they all have a guaranteed drop rate for a certain part of their armor set, and they're always passive until provoked. Here, in Scholar of the First Sin, this area is the only area they spawn in, and their drop rate is now randomized. This would be fine, but they are a huge pain in the ass to fight against, and once you provoke them, they respawn and come after you on sight. We're going to stick to the easy route for now and simply avoid them. They can chill in peace for a while. Anyways, after fighting through a bunch of their compatriots and getting mobbed on, yeah, this is going to be a long video to make. We find a fog gate, which is a traditional Souls way of saying boss area. Let's step on through. I don't have much trouble taking this guy on. I must have beaten him 100 times now, but this platform is a little small, don't you think? We were actually supposed to raise some additional platforms to negate this falling hazard, but that would mean fighting a lot of these knights to get at the lever, and at the moment I'm not about that life. Anyways, we kill the boss, and find another bonfire not too far from his boss area. We also encounter another NPC. There are a few other NPCs we could have talked to already at Majulaar, but I want to save that whole discussion about the hub world for later. For now, she tells us that she came here to spread the good word of miracles and offers to sell us some spells. I'll pass, the only miracles I need are good hitboxes. Travelling back to Majulaar, and we get our first opportunity to level up some stats. These stats play a huge role in the type of playstyle you'll be pursuing as you develop your understanding of the game, and for beginners, it can be kind of daunting to pick what to level up. This is such a recurring theme in RPGs, and I hate it. Though this is definitely not just a Dark Souls issue. While I'm armed with the power of hindsight now, when I first played Dark Souls, I had no clue what any of these stats meant, and if this is your first time looking at a Souls game, you probably won't either. Thankfully, I do know what I'm doing. Sorta, and I find it best to dump equal points into various stats as opposed to all of them into one. Strength is usually the main stat I go for. This is what's known as a quality build, a jack of all trades, nice and balanced sort of playstyle. Now that we're leveled up a little, now let's go the intended path, which is the way I discovered I should have been going all along after a few hours into my first playthrough. We come through a cave and find a troll, who will smash you to pieces unless you avoid him. This is another one of those enemies who, to the best of my knowledge, don't spawn here this early in the game. Running past him and climbing a ladder, we come to one of the first gauntlets that will put new players on their heels, as tens of these hollowed soldiers try to kill you. They don't take too much to put down, but this is where you need to learn crowd control. There's also some prick throwing firebombs at you from above, and you need to get up there to take them out, whilst also outmaneuvering the soldiers. Thankfully, once you know about this little trick, you can play against the rules and take them out one by one. Moving through a fog door, we find some helpful messages. There are a lot of these scattered throughout the game. Beware of inattention. I think that's a pretty common idea for this game. We drop into a room and Jesus Christ, no kidding. This game unfortunately has a lot of what I consider to be artificial difficulty on top of the actual challenge the game presents, with all of these hidden enemies and traps. But whatever, it's all in the name of making you a better player, I guess. Yeah, how about you beware of inattention? Going up the stairs we climb a ladder, and I want to pause a moment because right here, we're in a place of history. To me, This spot right here is where Dark Souls 2 died in the eyes of the Souls community. Before this game was released, there was a lot of promotional material revolving around the game's use of lighting. Originally, this was supposed to be a much darker game, where having a torch was almost essential to navigating a lot of the darker levels. Not only would this have fit perfectly with the story and the game's themes about darkness and fire, it would have set this game so far apart from the original that comparing the two would have been pointless, and we likely wouldn't have had all the shit flinging that happens in the Souls community to this day. A great YouTuber by the name of VatiVidia talks a lot about the cut content of Dark Souls 2, which I'll link in the video's description. But even better, another YouTuber you may have heard of called Cropcat did a detailed comparison video between the retail version of the game and the promotional gameplay midway through development. This is perhaps one of the most criminal downgrades I have ever seen. I'm such a huge fan of this game already, but this darkness mechanic would have launched it into the fucking stratosphere in my opinion. Why was this cut? This honestly baffles me. I've seen some bad downgrades, but most of the egregious ones have been mainly graphical. It's rare to see a downgrade which changes the entire fundamentals of the experience like it has here. Now, I've been pulling a bit of a trick on you guys. What you're seeing on the screen right now is not how this game actually looks. I'm using a reshade preset found on the Dark Souls 2 mod nexus, which darkens the game significantly, on top of a few other post-processing tricks. To me, this is the closest we're going to get to the original look of the game, so we're going to keep playing with this on. We also meet another old crone who sells us a key to one of the locked buildings at Majulaar. She gives us some exposition on what's going on in Drangleic. Apparently some giants came to war with the kingdom many years ago and we're seeing the aftermath. She tells us it's time for it to move on and laughs creepily as we turn away. Sure. Going up the wall, we see a metal Bowser with a hammer. Thankfully, he can't climb ladders. What the hell's that? Damn! This motherfucker is tough. My weapon durability is almost low and he takes 1,000,000 hits. Oh god damn, I timed it wrong. Cursed? I thought we were already cursed. I'm exaggerating my reaction a little bit, but that's pretty much how my first encounter with this bastard went. Besides from looking like Hugh Hefner, being cursed also means our maximum health has fallen dramatically. Each time you die in this game, this continues to happen. The only way to get rid of it is to use a human effigy. Ah, that's better. I go up there for round 2 and no sign of him. Guess he didn't want to tempt fate, I respect that. Using a firebomb blows a hole in the wall and gives us a nice little shortcut, even though if it's only like 2 minutes. We go down a ladder and find a nice looking young man sitting by a portcullis. Liar ahead, therefore destroy. I usually like to see everyone's side of things before I make decisions. Who made you the liar authority? His name is Pate, and he very honestly tells us that the way ahead will lock us behind if we go in, and that he was with a fellow who decided to try his luck and hasn't came back out yet. He tells us there's treasure in there, which can only mean he wants us to go in and get it for him. Well, I do, and he wasn't kidding, his friend got fucking mobbed. Thankfully, I'm not his friend, and I take a look around for myself. Huh, there isn't anything here. Pate fucking tricked us. We managed to escape, and he doesn't seem surprised, nor does he admit any guilt. I'm onto you, Pate. He gives us a soapstone, which lets us call for co-op help so long as we're human. Pretty lousy compensation, Pate. Whatever, moving on. We unlock another shortcut and go down an elevator to the boss room. We also see Pate's summon symbol outside of the fog door, but I'm pretty confident and go at it alone. Oh, this is a giant. For a first boss, this is more along the lines of what I'd expect. He has some basic stomp attacks to start with, and once he gets to around half health, he rips his friggin' arm off and starts swinging it like a guy with a newspaper trying to swat a fly. After doing some more stomping, we get him to trip over, and eventually we beat him. You know what they say, don't fall, gets you down. We have some more souls now, so let's head back to Majulaar and level up. Before we do that however, let's go use that key we bought earlier. This unlocks the blacksmiths, so that we can reinforce our weapons. We can also repair them, but that's kind of pointless since weapon durability refreshes every time you sit at a bonfire. Lenegrast is one of the more interesting characters you'll meet. He sits and hammers away all day like a real labouring man. He calls us a flirtatious adventurer, but I don't think he really understands the gravity of our mission. We also find a shopkeeper who tells us about the land he's from. He also has a few pieces of armour for sale, but it's nothing we really need. There's a rundown mansion which is locked, and the message tells us that the key is in the forest, and another store where a cat sells rings. Enchanté? I never realised France was in the Dark Souls lore. We also see a huge pit. You can tell by the items that we're going to be coming down here later. For now, it's back to the forest. After we kill the giant, we got a key, and the door we use it on isn't far from the shortcut we unlocked. Running past some more soldiers, we get another fog door, and oh, now it's time for round 2, motherfucker. Now, in case you didn't notice, this is the intended second boss of the game. Thankfully, if you kill him the first time, this second fight doesn't happen, but this is so cheesy. Well, I'm cheesy too. In the boss area, there are ballistas which you can use on the pursuer. He's a great fight and we'll talk a little bit more about him later, but for now, I have no shame. Get fucked. Once we kill him, we move on to see some soldiers trying to kill a dead giant. Just doing their duty. We sit inside a bird's nest for some reason and we get taken away. Well, guess I'm the pursuer now. No, we get dropped off in a tower. Before we go anywhere else, we're going to go back and level up. I'm going to be doing this a lot every time I beat a boss, so from now on, just assume that's why I got leveled. Our first room is full of dogs who dive bomb you while someone fires bolts at you from above. Once we're done here, we get a chest and these items. Oh, what the fuck? I go back down there and try to give him a piece of my mind. Just as things look like they're going well, he unleashes a bunch of fucking spirits on me and I get ruined by them. I'm going to take that as a sign. Here we also meet a knight named Lucatiel, and I thought I was recording, but apparently not. Either way, she wears a cool hat and agrees to help us on our journey. She's not here since she moves on once we trigger a bonfire, but we'll see more of her, don't worry. We kill some of these mummy guards and throw a barrel of gunpowder down the stairs. Boom! Moving into the new point of entry, we find another blacksmith. He's not as charismatic as Lenegrast and goes on about flame while laughing. I give him an ember so he can reinforce my weapon and steal a bunch of his stuff. Moving on, we use a fragrant branch of yore to unpetrify the statue guarding the door and clear our way through the rooms. We also get another fog door. Now, I don't like to shy away from challenges, but with the power of hindsight, I know that to make this as smooth as possible, I need a summon for this boss. Why? Well, let's step through and find out. Not only is there a boss right in front of us, but there are fucking 3 of them. Falling off this platform causes all of them to swarm you, and our summon helps hugely in this fight. I don't have any shame about this. 1 boss is hard enough. 3? I'm bringing in the boys. Yeah, goodbye Belclair. Goodbye. Next to the bonfire is another ladder, and going down it we find... No. No! This time I don't give up. Fuck you. Turns out this wasn't the way we were supposed to go, and there's a weird face on the wall that requires the lockbox to open. So, going the actual intended way, and we navigate our way through suicide bombers and find... What's this? Every now and again, if you see a message by a wall, chances are it's illusory, which means you can press A on it and it'll disappear. And we find another. Out here we move on to Sinner's Rise. In the distance we see... Are they... We'll come back later. Going down an elevator and we go into a dark chamber. Our movement is pretty slow and holy shit! Another boss spawns and starts ripping us to shreds. If we're going to get through here, we're going to need a torch. So, we light one. And going back through, rolling through the water actually takes the torch out. That's an oddly thoughtful feature. Well, at least we get across the bridge now, and we make it to the fog door. We get another cutscene where a bug crawls into this creature's eye and she turns the lights out. Uh-oh. I can't see shit! My only way to fight is to use the lock-on feature and try to listen out for sound cues, but it's all in vain. This fight has to be dodging only with a torch in my left hand, so when it comes for round 2, the torch really makes all the difference. This is exactly the kind of fight that was intended for this game, and I won't betray my opinion about it just to make the fight easier by using a shield. It's a slog and I burn through some healing items, but we get the job done and get a fat lot of souls for our troubles. This is one of the great souls the woman at the bonfire mentioned, so theoretically we're about a quarter way through our quest. And that's all there is to do at the Bastille. Now that we're a little more leveled, let's head back to Hyde's Tower. There's one more boss we can fight here, but he takes some getting to. Remember that dragon from earlier? Before you can get to the boss, you have to kill him to lower a drawbridge. But before we can do that, we have to slog through all of the enemies in your path. Because if you don't, it could get messy. Also, all of the knights are looking for blood, and they are such a pain to fight. Anyways, once we finish clearing the path, all we need to do now is cross to the dragon. He breathes fire once you're in range, and he can hit you through walls. Okay, he stopped. Come on, come on, come on. Get some, you piece of shit. Ah, that's better. Killing him lowers the drawbridge, and we're free to meet an old friend. Anyone who played Dark Souls will recognise him as Ornstein, though here he's called the Old Dragon Slayer. His moveset is almost the exact same it is in the original Dark Souls, and for that reason I managed to kill him no problem. I see him and Smo in my dreams. This isn't anything unusual. With the souls we earn from him, we level up some more, and from there it's off to a new part of the world. We pay the woman we met above the Dragon Rider fight to perform an air quotes miracle for us. I think the designers are projecting something here. It's a short walk to the next bonfire, and things get dark pretty fast, which totally confuses me. Isn't Majulaar supposed to be down there? Whatever. We move through some mist, which is never really a good thing, and into a building. Now, I can't remember where I heard it, but I definitely remember hearing that in the pre-release demos, it was possible that when you break these boards, light would spill into the room and illuminate it from the outside. Here's how the room looks with my torch, the reshade, and one of the windows broke. Putting my torch away, here's how it looks with both of them broken and no torch. I mean, I guess it lights up this little balcony we're on, and while I can't seem to find a clip of how this looked in the pre-release anywhere, I believe it. I want to do another little graphics comparison here at the bonfire. It's night and day. Moving on, we move further into the Huntsman's Copse. These creatures with the hooks always reminded me of the abominations from Warcraft 3. We also get our first invasion. Invaders can be both players and NPCs, but the Forlorn are pretty notorious. They spawn randomly with random weapons and have killed speedruns and no-hit runs because of this. You can't prepare for them until it's too late. Luckily, this one's not too bad, and defeating him isn't too big a pain. What is a pain is the fact that we can't lower this bridge without getting into this little hut where the switch is. So, looking around, we find another bridge, and the enemies here are pretty tough. They dish out a lot of damage and don't give many openings for an attack. So, naturally, we have to fight a whole gauntlet of them before crossing another bridge. Then, it's through the boss door. This fight is a little more gimmicky than the others, since we need to slowly make our way around to the switch to close the gate, but on our way there, we are hounded by skeletons and they come back to life constantly unless we kill their shamans. Running past them, we close the gate and the chariot finally becomes killable, but oh god, I have no health items and these skeletons are not letting up. Yeah, it's another one of those. Making it through, again, after a few attempts at just straight running past the gauntlet of enemies, I get in. You have to kill these shamans to stop the skeletons from rising, and the first one's pretty easy to see, but the second one is tucked away in a little corner and it took me forever to find him. Once he's dead and I lower the gate, the real challenge of the boss is over with, and I beat it no problem. Easy souls. Then, it's back to the cops. We see a bonfire just out of reach behind a locked door. I already know the key isn't far, however, so I just run and grab it after fighting another invader. And we meet Creighton, who was done over by Pate. Remember him? He tells us that he tried to set a trap for Pate, but it backfired and he's been stuck here a while. You know what they say? When going for revenge, dig 2 graves. He swears his vengeance against Pate, and we continue on our way to our next boss door. This is another one of those bosses with mob spawns, but thankfully the skeleton lords themselves are pretty harmless. Each one you kill spawns a different set of mobs, and in my first playthrough, I made the mistake of killing all 3 of them at once and getting mobbed hard. I'm not going to make that mistake again. You kill one of them, kill the mobs, rinse and repeat until done. Easy. Further up the road, we find another bonfire and a woman who sells stones. Exhausting her dialogue sends her back to Majulaar, where we find out from Lenegrast that she's actually his daughter. She seems pretty clueless, but it's oddly heartwarming to see anyways. Lenegrast's a bro. Going back to Earthen Peak, this is one of the uglier areas of the game. There's poison everywhere, as well as a bunch of items for us to hoover up. We also have a new enemy, who can one-shot us with a Kamehameha. We find another bonfire very close to the previous one, and another enemy, who reminds me of Homer Simpson as the Hulk, except this guy has a huge fucking hammer. One of them poisons himself, and we don't even need to touch him to kill him, which I sort of find strange. You'd think being in these conditions and having green skin would grant you some sort of resistance, but oh well. We also fight these pyromancers who... yeah. Getting past all of that, we have a boss door. And then we go to find a less cool Jabba the Hutt. I'm fighting him, and this is not a very good boss. We've already fought a couple of bosses which were underwhelming to say the least, but this is boring. Look, I'll be frank with you, this won't be the first boss like this, so let's just move on and we'll talk more about this once we have a minute to rest. Right now, we're on a quest. The area inside is a bit of a maze, and I die quite a few times from all the poison, but I'll save you the pain of watching me figure it out. We also get another Forlorn invasion, but we're so close to the bonfire. I have to run straight past him and try to make it. Oh god. Oh god. Yes! The Forlorn kills us, but we get the last laugh. Right below the bonfire is the main boss of the area, so let's run past the guards and check her out. Now don't blink, because you will miss it. Now, if you're not knowledgeable of the game, you're probably just as confused as I was. I tried and I tried and tried again to kill her, and each time looked something like that. Well, what I didn't know was that much earlier in the area, I was supposed to use a flame butterfly to light a torch and burn this wheel, which apparently drains all of the poison out of the area. What? How the fuck was I supposed to know that? There's an enemy who looks like a jacked up Draugr from Skyrim guarding it, but they're everywhere in this area. This was not signposted very well at all. I've seen people who talk about cryptic puzzles in video games, and Castlevania's Tornado gets brought up a lot, but on top of that, it's mainly just puzzles and graphic adventure games, or puzzle games. You know, games where you're expected to solve puzzles? What's with this? Whatever. We go back to the boss, and now that we're not getting poisoned, it's a doozy. She's a cool looking boss, but I wish she had a wider moveset. Anyways, we go on an elevator which takes a while, and we're in Iron Keep. We're going to talk a bit more about how awful this transition from a poisonous wasteland to a lava castle is later, but we've got a few more opportunities for some easy levels before we come back here, so let's go kill some more bosses. Getting back to Majulaar, and we have a new arrival to our little town. His name's Gilligan, and his voice actor is Irish, which I think is so appropriate for his character. He swindles us into purchasing some ladders to make the descent into the gaping hole in the middle of town. Before we dive straight in, however, we need a cat ring which will let us negate a lot of fall damage. Here's what happens when you don't have it, even without armor. Yeah. Oh damn it, it's too expensive. Oh well, now's probably a good time to go kill another boss anyways. First, we're going back to the Bastille, where we use a lockbox to open the door. This takes us to Belfry Luna. No, no! He tells us he'll chop us up if we touch his bell, so naturally, we touch his bell. Now, I know what's coming, and this is another one of those bosses where I have no shame about bringing him back up. Enter the Belfry Gargoyles. This is another copy-paste boss from Dark Souls 1, and they're actually one of the earliest bosses you'll fight in Dark Souls. However, in that game, you only have to fight 2 of them. Here, 5. 5 bosses. They're all strong too. Our summon takes most of the aggro and dies, but his job is done. This fight is such a mess. Oh well, we collect some more souls and head back to Majulaar. And we buy the ring. This will make some drops later in the game much easier. For now, it's down to the Grave of Saints. It's pretty dark in here, so let's take a torch. This area is pretty small, and we get another bonfire outside of a fog door not but a few minutes from the last one. This is becoming a thing, isn't it? Stepping inside and we find rats, and there are lots of them. Eventually, after we kill a bunch, the boss of the area comes out. He takes a handful of hits to kill. This is another covetous demon level boss, but we're rewarded with a visit to the Rat King. Now, despite killing a bunch of his subordinates, he actually invites us to serve him. I'll pass, but this is comical. Going further down to the catacombs, we eventually come to the gutter. This is another one of those areas where lighting is absolutely essential. Oh hey, there's the bonfire. Oh fuck. Are you kidding me? We should just continue. There's another bonfire not too far. Now, I said I played this game numerous times, and I remember the vast majority of the areas, but this is a maze. Lighting torches helps keep track of where I've been, but jumping around these platforms isn't fun. Thankfully, we're not far from the... What the hell? He kills me in 2 hits? Look at him! At least we get another bonfire the second time. And from there, it's onto the Black Gulch. This is another gauntlet of poison, and thankfully we have another branch of yore, so we can get to the secret bonfire. Come on. Come on! Move! Christ, this game cuts it a little too tight sometimes. Anyway, we're now a small distance from the fog door, so let's head inside. We get another cutscene, and this boss is one of my favourites in the game. The first time I killed this guy, I was so underprepared. He's not exactly tough as nails, but he takes a beating, and these fire pits suck. Well, once I get my weapon repaired, I can dish out a bit more damage. I also use an ooze on my weapon, which gives me a temporary elemental buff. In my humble opinion, I think this looks badass. Once we beat him, we kindle another primal flame. Unlike the Lost Sinner, this flame isn't just in an empty box, and we see a strange looking fountain. Interacting with it teleports us to a strange place, but the door is locked. Now would probably be a good time to mention that I have not actually played the DLC for this game, but don't worry, we're covering those too. Because I've not played them, however, I have no clue which DLC this door is actually to. Only time will tell. Before we go to the Iron Keep, we have one last area to visit. Warping back to Hyde's Tower of Flame, there is another area we missed, but before we get there, we use another branch and get some new armour. Next up, No Man's Wharf. This area always reminds me of Dunbarrow Cove from Oblivion. It's awesome. The lighting in this area also works really well with the reshade. Here's another comparison. I can't see into the building without it on, but that's exactly the point. We also encounter these dark dwellers and they hate light. They sort of resemble the Tzeentch creatures from Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Our torch keeps them at bay long enough to kill them in a few hits. You might be wondering why we're even in this area. After all, if you know anything about No Man's Wharf, you'll know that ship over there is the intended way to get to the Lost Bastille, but we took a shortcut earlier by taking the Eagle. Well, before we get to the main reason why we're here, we once again meet Lucatiel, who tells us some more about her story and reveals to us that she's starting to hollow. Damn. Even though I forgot to record our first encounter, it's clear that Lucatiel is starting to suffer. In fact, if we quickly walk back to the Black Gulch, we can meet her again. She tells us about her search for her brother, who came here after succumbing to the curse. And then, once more at Earthen Peak, and our dialogue here is fantastic. I'll just let it play.
Loss frightens me no end. Loss of memory, loss of self. If I were told that by killing you I would be freed of this curse, then I would draw my sword without hesitation. I don't want to die. I want to exist. I would sacrifice anything at all for this. It shames me, but it is the truth. Sometimes I feel obsessed with this insignificant thing called self. But even so, I am compelled to preserve it. Am I wrong to feel so? Surely you do the same in my shoes. Maybe we're all cursed from the moment we're born.
Her spawn locations are pretty hidden, and you have to go out of your way to find them. She used to just spawn by bonfires in the base game. I have no clue why they changed it. This basic change in spawn basically ruins her quest for me, since I had no clue she was in these areas until I had another look around. Going back to No Man's Wharf, we finally get to meet Gavlan. Gavlan wheel, Gavlan deal. He's the only NPC in the game who you can sell items to, which means we can finally get rid of all the crap we've been hoarding this entire time and get an easy level. After that, we pull a lever and we summon Lucatiel. We don't have to, the boss is pretty easy, even if I wasn't overleveled, but I think she's the best companion character in the whole series. We step on board the ship and beat the fuck out of the boss. Thanks, Lucatiel. We activate the ship, which takes us out into the night. We spend the rest of our days as a hollow pirate on the high seas. At least, if you stop playing here, that's the ending. But we're not, so let's move on to Iron... Wait. There are more things we need to do. Don't worry, the payoff is awesome. Coming back to Majulaar, we upgrade our gear, level up some more, and then it's off to the Shaded Woods. Here we meet Benhart, who has a Scottish voice actor. He tells us that the way is blocked by a statue.
Hey, you don't think a real live person was turned to stone, do you?
Oh no, Benhart, that's impossible. We unpetrify the statue, and for once it's not an enemy. She's called Rosabeth, and she offers to teach us pyromancies after coughing her lungs out. She asks us for some clothes since her hairs are ruined, so as a practical joke, I give her another tattered robe. Beggars cannot be choosers. Benhart thanks us for clearing the way and offers to repay his debt in battle. We'll hold you to your word, Benhart. After that, we're through to the Shaded Woods. In here, we get another bonfire not but a minute after the last one. Why? We also get a fork in the road. This is always nice. Let's go down them one by one. The first path leads us to... a dead end. Nice. On the second path, we see some weird looking koala bears who lead us to a troll, but we can just run straight past him. And another dead end. Sort of. We'll be back later. The third path is where we actually need to go, and it is impossible to see these invisible assassin pricks without a torch. I'm actually willing to bet the reshade helps in this area rather than makes it harder to see in some areas. Moving through the forest and we come to a little shrine where a head starts talking to us. He tells us his name is Vengal and he was a warrior who was hired to fight in the war we keep hearing about. For a severed head, he seems pretty calm. I think I would be too. After exhausting his dialogue options, he warns us to stay away from his body, who's still roaming around killing things, and he gives us his helmet, which looks fucking badass, so we're going to be wearing it from here on out. Don't you worry, Vengal, we'll do your helmet proud. Moving on, we find these urns which can curse us if we stay near them for too long, and another petrified statue. He looks relatively humanoid. Okay, never mind. We do get a key from him, however, which we can use to rescue Weaponsmith Arnifex, a crow demon who thanks us for freeing her and tells us she can help us if we swing by her shop later. You might be wondering, she's a crow. Well, it's Dark Souls. And to make matters even weirder, we also meet a scorpion. Remember that ring we bought earlier? Well, we also bought a ring called the Ring of Whispers, and this is where we get to use it. The scorpion's called Tark, and after telling us his story about being turned into a scorpion by his crazed master, he asks us to kill his wife. Sure, I guess. I mean, we probably were going to do it anyways. So, moving on, the boss gate's just up ahead. Sure enough, we can summon in Tark. In we go. Scorpion S Narc is a pretty good fight, even with Tark as a summon, and her design is really cool. Tark is noticeably smaller than her, which I just chalked out to the fact that he's a summon and she's a boss. But no, actually, looking it up, and male scorpions do tend to be smaller than female scorpions. While I doubt that their size differs this much, it's nice to see that they increased their size like this. We beat her down without problem. Side note, you should never settle a divorce like this, even if your wife is a huge scorpion. Then it's through to the Pharaoh's doors. This area... Well, for starters, there are lots of these doors which use these lockboxes we've been collecting, and, well, see for yourself. Oh, come on. Now, on my first playthrough, I did miraculously find a bonfire, but only after opening so many of these doors at random. There's also a fog door here, so you know what that means. In we go. It's empty. Well, we better get rid of these rats just in case we... Oh, there he is. While he's not insane, he does do a lot of damage, and he actually manages to kill me. But now that I've seen his moveset, I know what to do. And so I apply some magic to my weapon and step back on in for immediate revenge. In true Dark Souls fashion, the closer to the legs you are, the better, and I take him out no problem. This was a pretty terrible boss fight in all honesty, since he's basically a redone Sith from the original game, but without any of the charm. Since we killed yet another of the Royal Rat Kingdom, we get another encounter with the Rat King, who once again asks us to join his covenant. No thanks. This also unlocks a shortcut back to the first bonfire, where we could have taken the stairs up to the next area where our old buddy Gavlan is having a drink and basking in the ambience. We wheel, he deals. Now, we could move straight on, but we have one last thing to do here before we go, and that's find a specific item which drops randomly on each of these game nights. It takes forever to get it, and I have to refresh them at the bonfire a couple of times, but eventually I get one. I'll tell you why when the time comes, but for now, on we go to Brightstone Cove Teldora. Try saying that 5 times. Here we see some burning piles of corpses. That always lightens the mood. We get a boulder dropped on our heads and fight some of these farmers off. These guys look like the villagers from RE4, though in that game they have a little bit more life in them. Getting through these guys and we see a door with some spiders on it. If you have arachnophobia, I'd recommend skipping ahead a bit because this room is creepy as fuck. It's probably something about the saliva dripping down from their fangs, or the fact that they don't even jump down to attack you, they just stay up there in the dark. Just past this room is a fog door, and you'd probably assume it's something spider related, but no, we have the Prowling Magus and Congregation. I'll let this whole fight play out for you, just so you don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that this is probably the worst boss in the game. Oh sure, Covetous Demon was bad, so was Royal Rat Authority, but I can kill the main boss of this room in 5 hits. You can't see his health because of the annoying read message prompt, but you don't even need to. He drops like a fly. This felt so pointless. It's not even like we get that much from him either. After that we get another bonfire, and if we climb a ladder we meet Cromwell.
Something seems to be bothering you.
Oh yeah, probably not the spider feasting on a corpse in the corner or anything. He sells magic, that's all there is to him. Exploring this area some more, and we meet Arnifex. Here we learn that she can turn boss souls into boss weapons, but since we've already used them all to level up, and honestly they're not that great, we just pass. My broadsword is all I need to kick ass. We're also stuck down here. There isn't any way out of this pit besides jumping into the sinkhole, so each time you want to visit Arnifex, you're going to have to bring a Hornwood Bone down with you. Thankfully, it's not too far from the bonfire to the boss door, and after clearing out a room full of spiders who all hate my torch, it's time to traverse down these spiderwebs and get to it. This cutscene is really creepy. Here we go, the Duke's dear Freya. Now, I want to point out that she spawns spiders indefinitely until you kill her, and she's sort of a pushover without the torch in my hand to fend them all off. None of them come anywhere near me while I have this in my hand, to the point where half of the challenge of the boss is taken away. She has two faces which you have to attack since our sword is no match for our exoskeleton, but only one of them attacks at a time, sort of like the Flexial Sentry we fought with Lucatiel. So as long as you have the torch in hand, you can always just run straight to the other face while the other one shoots lasers and spits acid into the air. She also has a stomp attack, but it's pretty easy to avoid. You arachnophobes can rejoice, because we kill her first try. An interesting thing to note is that I think Freya is the only boss in the series who drops her soul to the ground rather than just letting you absorb it. You can fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's true. And then we're through to the Lord's private chambers. Is this the Lord? No. And now we get another primal fire to link. I want to point out that so far, these fires have been mostly in empty rooms. In fact, a lot of this game is pretty empty. Besides the exteriors, which are well detailed enough, the interiors are all pretty bland. They always have the same sets of wooden furniture in them, and this can make things pretty hard to memorise, especially in areas like Earthen Peak, which I found to be really difficult to navigate through my first time playing. Even now I had some difficulty. Anyways, we come back to Majulaar, squeeze all of the levels we can out of our souls, right down to only having 7 left, and now we get to go to Iron Keep. This is one of my favourite areas of the game. Despite the fact it's sort of lackluster, it's bright, aggressive, and the knights here are sort of like samurai. Awesome. On my first run through of Dark Souls 2, this area was really where I fell in love with the series. My best friend came over to play it with me and we stayed up all night being boss after boss and experiencing the game for the first time with each other. After he'd fallen asleep, I kept playing and it took me hours just to get through this area. It was such a challenge, but I kept going and going until eventually I made it through to the other side. But I won't spoil anything for now, so let's head on in. I haven't mentioned it yet, but there's actually a respawn limit which is exclusive to this game. I remember finding this out the hard way in this area. 12 deaths and they no longer respawn. These knights may only take 3 hits now, but I'm way optimized compared to the character I came here with the first time. And they can still kick my ass if I'm not careful. They don't get stunned very easily, so you have to finish them quick, and they do a lot of damage in pairs. These archers certainly don't do me any favours. Okay, the area is cleared. Let's head to the first boss of the area, the Smelter Demon. Other than looking awesome, he's got a pretty good moveset, but we do a lot of damage to him on account of our level. About halfway through the fight though, he sticks his sword into his chest and begins to deal extra damage. No biggie, right? Yeah, wrong. He kicks my ass! You can't block any of his attacks, and just being near him does damage. My first time through this game, this boss kept me up for so long. I attempted him so many times that I actually cleared this whole area of respawns. Eventually I caved in and looked at a guide, and found out that I was supposed to have gotten this Graham Great Shield by now, which has 100% fire resistance. How was I supposed to know this? Sure, I could have looked at a walkthrough the second time in, but I didn't want to do that. I never like feeling like I have to look at walkthroughs. We also have to ditch Vengal's helm for now, since it puts us over our encumbrance limit for fast rolling. Well, since this game wants to play dirty, I am too. We're bringing in our old pal Lucatiel. Let's see how this fight goes now. Well, largely the same, except Lucatiel's taking most of the aggro and I'm free to chop at his ankles while she takes the punishment. Once the second phase rolls around, this is important, since I still take damage and have to heal up just from being near him. Once that's done, we find a second bonfire, and this is actually a shortcut through to the main area. This area sucks. But before we go any further into this hell, I actually have something to admit. If we go through this door and use a pharaoh key on the wall, we get a bonfire and a ladder that I have never seen before. It takes us up to the roof of the keep and, oh no, it's the gnome again. These are actually called bell keepers, and once again he tells us not to ring the bell, so we do it anyways, but this time it doesn't do anything. There's actually nothing else to this area, but man, I was so surprised to find this all these years later. Okay, back to the gauntlet. This area kicks my ass. Shit! That was close. I managed to skate my way through, but these Bowser Armadillo guys really give me a hard time, and we have to fight 2 of them in a corridor. Once we're past them, we have some fire traps, which I totally underestimate since they burn me to a crisp in seconds. Time to do it all again. In case you were wondering, pulling this lever also just serves to increase the amount of environmental hazard you have to wade through. Okay, back to the fire traps. Just gotta time it right and... Fuck, what? Oh shit. Shit! Well, you know what they say, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. We make our way back again, and as it turns out, I'd missed the ladder to the bonfire above. Forgive me if I didn't really have time to take in the scenery with this bastard blocking the way. I did remember there being a bonfire somewhere around here, but I never remembered it being this close to the fire traps. Oh well. Time to face the boss and claim the last great soul. We get another great cutscene, and this boss is incredible. The fight itself isn't fantastic since he just spams fire breath and slams his fist down at you, but just the general aesthetic of this boss is great. We're fighting a huge fire-breathing Balrog-looking monster on a small platform suspended in lava, which, in case you didn't know, kills you instantly. I wouldn't recommend rolling right into it as you're about to beat the boss like I did, that'll annoy you a little. My second and third time went about the same. Not only can he laser beam you through walls, his fire also stuns you. And, like I said, he loves his fire. Okay, let's... Oh, he's doing it again. Alright, now... Oh, no. Okay, now for sure. Ah! Well, it's a little bit of an endurance fight, but I managed to beat him on my 4th try. This was where 16-year-old me realised he loved Dark Souls. Hours of strife, pain and death, and once you land that final blow, a wave of relief and accomplishment just washes over you. It's so rewarding. Let's light the final fire and return to Meet Aldia. I have no comparison to make for him because, well, look at him. He gives us a speech about inheriting the Order of the World or destroying it. Like we discussed at the beginning of the video, Aldi is talking about the linking the flame so that the cycle of the fire can begin anew, only to one day fade away with the coming of the undead curse. He tells us to seek Vendrick as if it's not what we were already doing and slinks away into the ground. Okay. Back at Majulaar, the woman tells us that we have all we need to make our way to the castle. I'd say okay, but we've covered all the game so far and I don't remember finding an entrance anywhere. At first I thought it was that door we couldn't get by, since it wanted me to produce the symbol of the king. Sure, makes sense, right? Well, while I obviously know where it is now, I spent so long searching for it the first time around. As it turns out, we've actually already went past it in this video. Go on, guess where it could be. You might get it. Yeah, remember that dead end we mentioned when we were in the Shaded Woods? As it turns out, the road to the castle is there, except if you're only half paying attention like I was, you're bound to miss it. Watch, I'm going to turn the camera 180 degrees. Without gluing your eyeballs to the screen, see if you can notice it. If you did, well, you have better eyesight than me, but I bet you didn't notice it earlier. Anyways, we go up to the Shrine of Winter and the door swings open since we have all the souls. This door will also swing open if you've accumulated 1 million souls throughout your playthrough so far. We also have another one of these fountains, so let's see where this one takes us. Yep, you guessed it, it's closed. Back to the shrine. Going down the road a little, and we come to what is possibly one of the most jarring weather transitions I've ever seen. Oh sure, Earthen Peak to Iron Keep is pretty weird, but at least the weather isn't noticeably different. It's still daytime and you have to go up an elevator to get there. Here, one end of the tunnel is daylight, albeit dim, and the other is a stormy night. Whatever, let's just trudge on. Now, I've been optimizing my character as I've been going along, and so far we haven't missed a single boss. We've even had additional levels up just from selling our items and farming enemies. Now, keep that in mind for a minute, since after we talk to the woman and she edges us on, we see some familiar enemies. Don't blink now. Christ! They beat the shit out of me! I've been over-leveled for most of the areas, but this is where I really have to play conservatively. After carefully kiting them back and fending off an invader, we feed these golem statues some souls and they kindly open the door for us. Aha! A ghost! This castle is officially a spooky haunted attraction. We talk to him and he seems stuck in the past as he recounts how Vendrick went to war with the giants on the word of a woman who came across from a far off land to warn him about how they planned to attack. Sounds a little fishy, but whatever. The things we'll do for love, I guess. Moving on, we find our next bonfire and we find the throne room. Not only are these thrones huge, but this is so empty. No pews, no decorations, just an empty box and 2 chairs. This is so disappointing, and the whole castle is like this. We see these huge doors, which again take souls to open, and behind them we have some sentinels from earlier, and then nothing. Why would they build the rooms like this? Why would they build anything like this? We have a room full of masks which shoot arrows once you open a chest, another room with a portrait of the queen which quickly builds your chaos meter if you go anywhere near it. A minute later we actually get to see her. She doesn't say anything we haven't heard before, just that Vendrick was a monarch but couldn't be a true king and that we should go see him. Yeah, thanks. Not like we had questions or anything. Oh, whatever. There's a boss room right around the corner, and this is another one of those bosses where I will not hesitate to call in some support. So, let's bring in Belclair once again. Oh! Not only do we fight the Dragon Rider from the beginning of the game, we get to fight 2 of them! Who thought this was a good idea? Someone at FromSoft should have been fired. We find Benhart by the next bonfire, jovial as ever. You don't say. As we progress through the castle, we see an unusual summon sign. Unusual in the sense that there's no boss anywhere around. I don't need any summon to help me with... Okay, sure, why not? You might think I'm scumming out with all of these summons, but as far as I'm concerned, if you put a boss of the game in as a mob, and then put me against 2 of them, this is fair game as far as summons are concerned. Well, the summon doesn't last long, and we get to move forward anyways. Right. Left. I love these messages. Yeah, I see the bloodstains. I'm not fooled. Fucking mimics. Going back out into the rain and we get a door and a ladder. Going up we find an archer and... yeah, I'm not even surprised anymore. So far, that's 4 different bosses which have all been recycled in this area alone. Let's just keep going. We get another golem to bring down an elevator which takes so long to come down and somehow even longer to go up. Getting to the top, it's almost like a reflex to just send the elevator back down. You know, just in case. And we find a key. I'm not waiting for that elevator to come back up and take me down either, so I'm going to homeward bone out. Using the key, we get an awesome path to the boss door. I run past all these enemies just because I'm not looking to waste health items on things I don't need to fight. And we have the Looking Glass Knight. I'm sad there was no cutscene for this guy because he's one of my favourite bosses in the game, possibly even the series. He's tough, he has a good moveset, and his design is cool, but it's the atmosphere of this fight that really makes it for me. He's a pretty good fight, but we managed to do it on our first try, because of course we do. Okay, time to run. And next we have Shrine of... oh god, I'm getting PTSD. Okay, let's talk about this area. First of all, fuck magic users. This area is full of them, and they all spam the same homing missiles which eat through my blocks, and these priest-looking enemies can hurt you if you get outnumbered. Even by themselves, you have to wait for an opening, because they're hard to stun. There are so many of both of these types of enemies, as well as these weird lizard men who constantly harass you. That's not to mention the floor is obscured by the water, and some of it you can actually fall into, so if you want to risk not falling into it, you need to bring a torch. I will say though, while this area is difficult, it's also pretty gorgeous. The calming singing in the background fits the theme really well, and there's this weird contrast going on between the danger around every corner and just how serene everything is. Ah, shit, shit, shit! Oh, fuck this. No more Mr. Nice Guy, we're bringing out the bow. It is purely because of aggroing this enemies out one by one like this that I'm able to get to the next bonfire. And from here we can run to the next boss no problem, though we have to deal with some hassle on the way. Here we go. The Demon of Song. Where to start with this guy? Well, his design's pretty creepy, and I don't know why, but I remember really struggling with him before. He does a lot of damage if he hits you, and his attacks aren't obvious. He sometimes only swipes once, sometimes he swipes both ways, sometimes he won't swipe at all. You can only hit his face and arms, but there aren't that many openings, so you have to play pretty conservatively and just play the fight out the long way. Take that, you weird freaky frog fuck. Next we go into a crypt. I summon a helping hand, purely because this area can be such a pain to go through. A little of the way, and someone suddenly tells us to put out our torch. Okay. He tells us that the light disturbs the dead. I can respect that. Light disturbs me when I'm asleep too. He also reveals a little bit more about the history of the cycle of fire and dark, and claims that it's the destiny of humans to usher in an age of dark. You're probably sick of hearing it by now, but this is yet another area where the lighting with the reshade is perfect. It almost fits how this game was going to be. Can't roll through these rocks, gotta... Oh, you are joking me. Excuse me, gentlemen. Oh, well, if you want to be like that. These shield guardians would make great nightclub bouncers. Alright, we drop the bridge, which acts as a shortcut straight to the boss run, which is... long. Not only do these phantoms keep spawning, there's another fucking dragon rider. Our companion has been handling half of these mobs like a champ up to now, but this proves too much and we're forced to run through to the boss door alone. Enter Velstadt. We get into the cutscene where he's guarding the entrance to King Vendrick. He's not too hard, but he leaves no room for complacency, and he even has some magic abilities. Oh shit, our sword's almost broken. Easy. Okay, let's finish this. Time to meet King Vendrick. Huh? After we find his ring, lighting a torch reveals the cold truth of the curse. Even Vendrick, the ruler of a kingdom who went out to meet the giants in war, now shambles around blindly, totally oblivious to our presence. This music is so fitting. This is sort of miserable. The whole game we've been told to seek out Vendrick, and now we find him here, without ally or purpose. The woman at the bonfire doesn't seem to have much to say either, as she simply tells us to take the ring to the King's Gate. I guess she's as shocked as we are. We could attack him, but what's the point? Would we really be doing ourselves any favours? Let's get out of here, this is depressing. Taking the ring to the gate, we produce the symbol of the king and move on through to Aldia's Keep. Here we find Lucatiel, who isn't looking too hot. Her dialogue here is so incredibly sad.
Forgive me. I know you. Yes, of course. How goes your journey? I know not what you seek in this faraway land, but I pray for your safety. My name is Lucatiel. I beg of you remember my name, for I may not myself.
Don't worry, Lucatiel, we will. Not too far from where we leave it, we find a brother. To repay for helping us earlier, we put him to rest before moving deeper into the keep. Going inside of the keep, and we see a dinosaur skeleton. I guess Aldi was a fan of Jurassic Park but couldn't get the formula right or something. I always expected this to be a boss, but no, it's just a skeleton. This is another area that was shown in the pre-release demos, and it looks so much more atmospheric then. It constantly baffles me to think about just what happened to this game for it to turn out like this. Anyways, moving up the stairs, we have to use a branch on this troll to get him to move away from the stairs. I've avoided fighting these trolls up to now because they hit pretty hard, but thankfully, for some reason his aggro range stops at the top of these stairs, so we can kite him out and get a few easy hits in. Why does his aggro range stop right here where he spawns? I have no clue. We also see a giant basilisk, but he seems pretty content chilling there, so we'll just leave him be. We move through a little corridor, die to an invader, get revenge, and yeah, I see you. We can't kite this guy though, so let's just run through. Come on, open the door. Really? For fuck's sake. Let's just get to this boss fight already. Yeah, you better stay in there. Here we get to fight a dragon locked in a big cage. It's the same enemy we fought near the beginning of the game, so he's a bit of a pushover by now. Nothing else to say about him. But look at that skybox. So nice. Once we take the elevator up, we're treated to one of the nicest looking areas in the game, Dragon Airy. This looks so good in my opinion. This game definitely favours these bright open settings. Not far from the bonfire, we get to take a zipline ride to the bridge. Whee! Come on, move, move. Shrek, I'm looking down. Ah! I hate bridges like this. Oh look, another bonfire. Oh, for crying out loud. He tells us some more about how life is an illusion and how men are living a lie and the curse is our true form, yada yada yada. But he asks us if we're intent on breaking this illusion, aka, are we going to break the cycle? We haven't really thought about that yet. In fact, we haven't thought about anything yet. We'll talk about that later when we wrap everything up, but for now, we just tell him no. Oh my god, just give me my damn bonfire. Now that he's gone, we're free to make our way up to the keep, and while these knights have the exact same moveset as the ones in the Tower of Flame, they do a lot more damage and they kick my ass. These dragon knights sit and watch, and they're only hostile to you if you flee from these big guys, since you've basically just shown them you're a bitch. Deserters will be shot. I'm not a bitch, however, and I slay my way through to the grand stairs, where one of them, presumably their leader, stands as the final test before we get to the top. He's difficult, but with enough kiting, we give him what for. We're free to meet the Archdragon. He telepathically whispers to us for a little while and gives us the Ashen Mist Heart. We could attack him for some souls, but he gives us what we came here for, and his knights are pretty courteous about letting us walk around on their turf, so we'll just back off. Now, from here, we could go and do the rest of the game, but earlier in Drangleic Castle, we got a mysterious item, which I'm 99% sure unlocks the DLC area we couldn't see in earlier. So, off we go. Going back to the Shrine of Winter, we enter, and the storm that we couldn't see anything through has died down. Now we can enter into Aleum Lois, and these skyboxes look incredible. We get to the first bonfire, and a voice tells us to turn back, as the old chaos still hungers. Well, it can't be any worse than the primordial truth from Warhammer, so let's forge on. Wow. First impressions can mean a lot in level design, and since this is my first time seeing this, I can honestly say that I'm impressed. Let's meet our first enemy. Where? Oh, what the hell? I can't see it. I've seen some people perform incredible feats while blind. I've seen someone beat Dark Souls 1 using only his friend for guidance, and there are even totally blind gamers who would kick my fucking ass in a fighting game. But I'm not blind, and I should be able to see this boss. Well, I guess we'd better explore the area a bit, huh? Aleum Lois is a pretty cool area, but it's definitely more of a level area than a world area, if you know what I mean. This suffers from the same thing as Drangleic Castle, where areas just don't make sense. It doesn't really look as if anybody would actually live here. These enemy placements don't really feel organic, and for the areas there's just a lot of empty corridors and rooms. The outside parts, however, are nice, like the ramparts and the courtyards, and I dig the frozen atmosphere. Moving through, we find the Eye of the Priestess, which finally lets us see the boss, a big fucking tiger. Awesome. As we've already seen, she can summon magical missiles, but her claws are her best weapons, and she does so much damage. I considered summoning help, but this is such a cool boss fight, and I don't like cheating myself out of a cool boss like this. So I die. Die again. Die some more. Oh shit, my weapon broke. Ah! She's casting a spell. Shit. Menu. 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 This'll do. Damn! Those are some pretty fucking close frames. Yes! Now we can enter the Grand Cathedral. Before we go any further, it's clear that my gear is a little outdated by now, so let's head back to Majulaar and switch it out for some better equipment and use the souls we just earned to upgrade it. By now, I've hoarded so much Titanite so we can get some pretty good upgrades. Once we're in the cathedral, we get to talk to that voice we heard earlier. She tells us that the king who built this place plunged into the heart of the chaos which lay beneath the land in order to sate its hunger, but it didn't work, and now the land is frozen in time. She also tells us that she can't help him herself because she has to remain here to contain the chaos, and that she's too weak to combat it. That seems like a reasonable excuse. So she asks us to help our lord by freeing him of the chaos. Okay, I can do that. Before we get to the heart, she tells us that the Knights of Lois followed their leader down into the chaos, and there they remain. The rest of the knights are still waiting for someone to lead them down and free their king, and that would most definitely be us. So, before we head down, we battle through the rest of Aleum Lois and find their comrades, who are all sitting patiently in chairs. Oh yeah, I don't trust you already. Go on, get... off. Damn it, whatever. Got my eye on you. Oh, I fucking knew it. You are so dead. Oi. Where the fuck are you going? Ah, shit. I better repair this. Alright, where are you? Oh, there he is. Right next to the reskin covetous demon. Well, at least it's not a boss. Oh, screw you. At least I unlocked a shortcut. You'll be stuck here for the rest of your miserable life. This is why I don't play PvP. The third and final night we find is atop this tower, and we actually get to see the rest of the city. It's all just a skybox, but seeing actual civilization, even if it is just frozen over, is a really nice thing. The other games mention cities and civilizations, but all we ever see is ruins and caves or forests and castles, whereas this is an actual city where thousands of people lived. It's a small touch, but it really helps to sell this idea that Aleum Lois is a different land completely. Alright, we're ready to take the plunge. We got all of our knights, let's go. We drop a huge way down without taking any damage, and this boss arena is really cool. Before the boss comes out, we have a big gang fight with his knights, and once they're all dead, out comes the Burnt Ivory King. Other than having an awesome name, he has a really big moveset and he's aggressive as hell. He takes so much damage to kill, and alone, I can't beat him. I try and try again, but I have to admit, even for me, I think he's too difficult. Now, I know I said earlier that I hate to scum out with summons, but I think I'm going to need all the help I can get here. So, since the boss has some of his knights with him, and on top of being crazy hard, we're going to bring in some additional backup. Let's go, Lucatiel. And, Twiggy. This fight goes a little bit easier now, especially the rumble with the knights, but I'm making too many mistakes and taking too much damage still. It takes a few more tries, but with a little bit of patience and Lucatiel at my side, we managed to do it. We free the Ivory King. We get his crown as an item and head back to the cathedral, where the woman, now revealed to be Alsana, tells us a little bit more about how all this happened. Her story goes that, like Nashandra, she was a part of the original Dark Soul, which split apart into different pieces. She was one of them, though she was much less powerful than her counterparts, and she came here to Aleum Lois, where the Ivory King took care of her. Her love for him and his courageous act of sacrifice was what compels her to stay, despite her inherent darkness, and fulfill her lord's wishes until the end of time. This is such great world building, and we have even more to come. Now that we've checked one DLC off the list, let's head back to the Forest of Fallen Giants and do a little bit more of the main story. Earlier on, we found out that the King's Ring let us open certain doors, and while I didn't show it, one of those doors happens to be in the Forest of Fallen Giants, right over this lizard pit, which if we jump into, we die because holy fuck, what are these fireballs? We also find a key in there though. We'll get to finding out what this is for in a minute, but for now we open this king door and we find a shimmering giant corpse. Whoosh. One cannot reside in the memory for long. That's okay, I didn't intend to. Damn! We walk right out into the middle of a battle between the forces of Drangleic and the Giants, and it is friggin' awesome. It's rare that we get to glimpse into the past like this in a Souls game, and I appreciate it so much. Sadly, once we avoid the rolling statue head, we have to fight the boss of the area, so we don't get to see much of it right here, but at least we get something. This boss is also a huge pushover. The real enemy of this fight is the camera. As long as you stick to his ankles, all he does is really telegraphed stomp attacks, and alternating between his legs gets us some really easy souls. There are a couple of more of these, so let's skip ahead. We go back to the area where we beat the pursuer since there was another giant corpse there, and we also find Benhart. He talks about his sword, says we can't have it, and remembers his debt to us. We go into the giant's memory and we see him again. For some reason he recognises us, even though we're in the past, and talks about his sword some more. Yep, whatever, Benhart. We run through a battlefield and get another giant soul. Huh, that was fast. Going into the final giant's memory near where we met Pate, we get another NPC, Captain Drummond, who doesn't recognise us. This is a character that's obviously meant to be stuck in the past. His dialogue is interesting, since he tells us more about how the king went to war with the giants, but doesn't spin the same tale as Nashandra or any of the other NPCs for that matter. Instead, he tells us that the king pillaged the lands, as opposed to defending his kingdom from a looming threat, and that the giants are only here because of what Vendrick did to them, and his war on them was going on for so long that 2 generations of soldiers have been fighting the giants in Drangleic.
What has transformed him so? I cannot imagine.
Oh, I can't imagine. Nope, no clue. This memory's a little longer than the others, but it's still only a few minutes long, and we get our third giant soul. These souls are what we need to get into the last boss room, and the game's not over yet. We still have some DLC to complete. I want to reiterate that I've never played the DLC before, so I had to look up a guide on how to access these DLC areas. I don't have any shame about it either. How the fuck was I supposed to know that the key that we found in the lizard pit was what we needed to get into this area? I didn't even know we could drop down into the lizard pit until I actually looked up the guide and found out that that's where I was supposed to go. I'd never been down there before. Anyways, we warp into the fountain, open the door, take an elevator up to the top, and we enter the Broom Tower. Look at that. We have to tightrope walk across this huge chain, and we get our first bonfire. Then we, the hell is this? Attacking it doesn't do anything. Sticking a wedge into it seems to do the trick, though. That's a first. Descending to a lower level of the tower, we get our first new enemy of the DLC. He doesn't amount to much. I'm pretty powerful by now. 4 of them though, that's a different story. Though that tends to be the case with any mob, to be honest. The level design for this DLC is quite a bit less gamey than Oleam Lois, and while the enemies don't take much to kill, you still really have to think on your feet with dealing with them. These crawling fat asses will suicide bomb you, so you have to maintain a distance from them to ensure that you can get out of the way, but they also dive you from a sizable range. These mages can teleport around you and are usually backed up by these knights, and these guys sort of remind me of the trolls you fight in God of War, as they limber around holding these huge chunks of rocks on their back. Just get around this corner to heal and... oh shit. Once we find a scepter, we activate this huge contraption which lets us use the elevator to the bosses. Just gotta deal with them one at a time, one at a time, one at a what? Shit! One at a time! I opt to just run through most of the enemies from this point. It's easier this way. Oh, that is perfect. Dark Souls 2, ladies and gentlemen. We find the next fog door, and the bonfire is right around the corner from here. Thank Christ, the trek from the last bonfire to here is not fun. And now we face the Fume Knight. Just like with any Dark Souls boss I haven't faced before, I start out by staying defensive, get a feel for his moveset, how aggressive he is, maybe going for a few cheeky hits if I think I'm spotting some openings. This works for a little bit, but once you take damage, and trust me, you will take damage, his attacks eat through my stamina bar, which staggers me if I block, and once I go for a heal, nope. The Fume Knight does not fuck around. My number one weakness as a Souls player is heal timings. It's the main reason why I die so much, and the Fume Knight is one of the worst bosses for punishing healing. Not only that, but he heals too. If you don't get rid of these hard things outside of the boss arena, the Fume Knight can heal back to full health in seconds. I usually don't pay too much attention to the bar of health since my eyes are constantly focused on the boss, but whenever I checked to see how much damage I'd done so far, I was so confused. I thought it might have been an ability he had, and so I tried to fight him again and again without knowing that I had to get rid of these things outside of the fog gate. Once I did that though, he still kicked my ass. It took some doing, but after around 15 attempts, lots of life gems and reading guides later, I managed it. And we get the crown of the Old Iron King. Sure. When I heard about this DLC, I'd heard of another boss fight, but as I was surprised to figure out, he's technically optional. Well, the whole DLC is optional I guess, but the next fight in my opinion should have been the main fight for the area, and you'll see why. So, let's teleport back to the bonfire, take the elevators up, run through one of the worst gauntlets yet. Oh, for fuck's sake, it's those lizards again. We make it to Sarah Lon. Now this is a fucking fight. He's fast, well designed, and unlike the Fume Knight, I feel like he gives you a lot more fair openings. This plays out like a duel between 2 seasoned warriors and I love it. I actually managed to beat him first try here, after going in with only 2 Estus flasks and no life gems. As long as you play patiently and don't get greedy, he's reasonably easy, but I can definitely see a lot of other players having a hard time with him. Now, there is a third boss in the area, but I deliberately avoided him. Why? Because it's the fucking Smelter Demon again. Why? Back to Majulaar. Now, there is a third and final DLC called The Crown of the Sunken King, and I did play it and record it, but while making this episode, I had a realisation. That DLC is definitely my favourite of the bunch, And while I've basically shown you the whole game, if there's any chance I've sparked your curiosity about the game and you've never played it before, I'd be remiss to show you anything it has to offer. You'll thank me later. So the last thing to do now is to unlock the last King Gate, talk to Shanalot, who reveals that she was made by dragons and warns us that Nashandra will come after us, and walk on down to the Throne of Want. This is a really cool path to the boss gate. Awaiting us at the other end is a summon sign, and we can finally hold Benhart of Jugo to his word. Let's go, buddy. Huh. Well, I mean, they're a cool looking pair, and they're both reasonably menacing to deal with, especially solo, but at this point I'm really beyond the level the game expects you to be for these bosses. Once you deal with one of them, if you don't bring down the other really quickly, they'll run over and try to heal each other. Not on my watch. And we get our final boss cutscene as Nashandra shows her true form. This is about what I'd expect for her to look like, to be honest, though she kind of has a bit of a Jack Skellington thing going on with her face. Just me who thought that?
Now, be one with the dawn.
Her main threat comes in the form of these curse fountains. You can lure her out, but her swing attacks make little work of your stamina, and I actually run out of healing items. I attempt to use a healing item which takes a while to use in a last ditch effort, but nope. Even though she's slow, nailing like that in a boss room is never going to be fun, or a good idea. But on my second attempt, I avoid all of her attacks, let Benhart fulfill his promise by acting as a human meat shield, and I send her back to the abyss. It's time to take the throne. Now, let's pause a minute here. Just before we finish the game, we should talk about something. Have you noticed that we're about to do something we never came here to do? We're a good 30 to 40 hours in by now, and this whole time we've been told to seek the Great Souls, then seek the King, then all the stuff about the cycle by the likes of Aldia, but was this what we came here for? No, we came here to find a cure. We've blindly followed a path that we never intended to take, and now we're about to give our lives to renew some cycle we had no idea was even happening. We risked life and limb so many times just to fulfill this quest that some woman standing by a fire in a strange little town gave us. And did we find our cure? No, we didn't. But did we question anything along the way? Did we ask ourselves why we were doing this, either as the player or as our character? No, we didn't do that either. And once I realised that, I was sort of stunned. This game totally engrosses you into its story. The world building and lore are so fantastic that your mind wanders so far away from your original purpose for being there in the first place. Your questions turn from what am I doing here to what were the people who built this place doing here? From why am I doing this to why did Vendrick do this, or who was Tark's master, or what are the other lands like Mirror and Jugo like? As we take our throne and the doors close on us for good, we may never get the answers to our questions, but the fact we even started to ask them in the first place only serves to prove just how great Drangleic is as a set piece for this story. This story starts about you and ends up being about the world, and that's alright with me.
What lies ahead, only you can see.
And that's the game! Boy, what a journey. Where do we even begin to wrap things up? Well, Dark Souls 2 is, at its core, a game about adversities. It's a game about overcoming insurmountable odds. It's about braving the elements and challenging yourself to persevere when all hope seems to be diminishing. Both the story and the core gameplay loop revolve around the idea of a cycle. If you're not constantly dying and running back to die again, or if you're not leveling yourself up only to be met with a new, equally challenging boss, making you feel as if your advancements in power were nothing at all, or if you're not playing the New Game Plus and redoing it all over again, then you're listening to the many varied and interesting NPCs talking about it. All throughout the game, we've heard about the War with the Giants, the Chaos Flames, the fated cycle of fire and darkness. I think this overarching storyline gives the world a lot of depth. You're travelling a strange and morbidly beautiful land which is on the brink of an uncertain and possibly apocalyptic future. In all three games, you travel lands which are far past their prime, in a time where great civilizations have come to ruin and where everybody you encounter is constantly frightened about the shadow which looms over them, ready to engulf the world. Lucatiel is a perfect example of this. When you first meet her, she's calm, and each time you meet her after that, you get to witness her slow descent into madness as she forgets her purpose, and eventually, she pleads for you to remember her name. It's heartbreaking to watch, and really drives home just how corrupt this curse which hangs over the world is. A lot of this game's story is told through the environment. We see it all the way through the games, as the questions constantly arise in your mind. Who built this? What was it built for? What happened here? Slowly, you begin to piece together the puzzle for yourself, and there is no right or wrong interpretation. The story of the game is what you make of it, and that goes for all three of the main titles. There are hundreds of lore and theory videos talking about the possibilities, and for all we know, every one of them could be false. But it doesn't matter, because that's how this game's story was intended to be. While I personally would have preferred something more conclusive, I can also appreciate this fact, as it means that all of the assumptions I made about the game myself could, for all I know, be right. Moving on, let's talk about the music. The music in this game was and remains absolutely fantastic. From the soothing and calm melody of the hub world of Majulaar, which is by far the most comforting tune in any of the Souls games, to the pulsating orchestral boss themes, the range of music in this game is very memorable. Perhaps not as memorable as some of the other themes in the series, but there are certainly some golden tracks. Now, for any Souls fan watching this, don't worry, we're finally going to talk about the elephant in the room. This game has some awful bosses. No, seriously, some of these were so rushed it's impossible to forgive. Bad bosses isn't a thing unique to this game. I can certainly think of a few bosses in Dark Souls 1 and 3 that give me pause, but Dark Souls 2 is certainly the worst offender, and the criticism a lot of the community gives this game for it is well deserved. However, on the other hand, almost all of the bad bosses are optional, so it's clear they spent the budget on the main canon bosses, but fucking Christ. The Covetous Demon, Prowling Magus, Executioner's Chariot, etc, etc, all of these bosses are big cracks in the glass for this game. But it also has some great bosses. Dark Souls 2 gets a lot of criticism for simply being one guy in armor after another, but I think that oversimplifies things a lot. The bosses in this game range from absolute pushovers to being some of the series' best fights, and many of those are dudes in armor, like I just mentioned. The Looking Glass Knight in particular was really memorable. You're on top of a gothic rooftop in the rain, fending off hollowed souls he traps within his shield and dodging the thunder he harnesses with his sword. It's badass. The Pursuer, which is one of the first bosses you'll encounter, is as memorable a boss fight as any, provided you don't scum out and use the ballistas like I did. You have to seriously time your dodges right and make sure not to get cursed. He's unrelenting, dangerous, and was a tough bastard for me to beat my first time around. Since you're so underleveled by the point you fight him, this fight feels like it's a real first challenge, and it's a fight for survival. Your healing times have to be very narrow, and you can't just circle strafe him. If this is your first time playing a Souls game, this boss right here is what I would consider to be the gatekeeper, to see if you're ready to take on the rest of the game. He's a great fight. The Ivory King is arguably one of the best fights out of all of the games, and is my personal favourite in the series. My point is, just because of the majority of the bosses aren't, as Yahtzee puts it, vaginas with legs, doesn't mean that the game has bad bosses. I mean, it does have bad bosses, but not because they're bipedal and wear armour. They're all varied, most of them are enjoyable, and they kick ass. They're all challenging in their own right, and the majority of them left me wanting more. The areas in the game are also well varied, though sometimes I think the swamp theme is a little overdone, like at Earthen Peak, Huntsman's Copse, Harvest Valley, and even parts of the Shaded Woods. This game doesn't do green very well. While most of the interior areas are sadly disappointing, with empty box rooms and puzzling design, Drangleic Castle and Ironkeep especially, most of the outside areas are great. Hyde's Tower of Flame is a sinking ruined city hanging on by a thread. Dragon Area is just gorgeous to look at. No Man's Wharf is interesting. The DLC areas especially blew me away with how nice the environments looked. Now, as I stated earlier, this game is pretty difficult, especially for newcomers. Your first hours in Dark Souls will be difficult, but as time progresses and you learn more about the game and how it works, you become better and better, and you feel that progression as you go along, and by the end of your first playthrough, you will have at least become adept with the mechanics and the environments. Thanks to New Game Plus, which this game does the best out of any in the series I might add, you can go back to the beginning of the game and breeze through a lot of the areas you struggled with, and as a player this kind of reward feels good. The bonfire system in Dark Souls is a more visible representation of this sort of progression, since reaching that next bonfire is a subtle but literal way of telling the player that they finally overcome that boss and that they finally reached that part in their journey. But then that calls into question, how does a game like Dark Souls invoke such a personal feeling of reward? Surely any game could be mastered and make the player feel rewarded. In which case, the following question needs to be asked. Is Dark Souls 2, or the other Dark Souls games, or any hard game for that matter, a difficult game or a challenging game? When most games are easy to learn but difficult to master, Dark Souls provides an alternative, where learning the game is a difficult process, but once the player is well enough acquainted with the game and its systems, it becomes quite simple to master. You will learn the best way to go about fighting the bosses, you'll gain a perception of which builds are the best for your playstyle, and how to see through many of the tricks the game will pull on you. The game lets loose all of its tricks and lays them bare before your naked eyes, and this plays into the dynamics of the game. Enemies will sneak attack you, projectiles will hit you from unexpected angles, NPCs will trick you, the second boss of the game will spawn and attempt to fight you. This proverbial baptism of fire might initially turn some players off, but in my experience with games that are notoriously difficult, it's important to distinguish if a game is hard or challenging. Games which are just plain hard with no room for organic progression are often plain unfair, as these games tend to require more than the player can initially give and are wrought with artificial difficulty as opposed to challenging mechanics. Take a look at a game like Cat Mario, which is a notorious Flash game based on Super Mario, in case you somehow didn't get that from the name. Even if you're the best Mario player in the world, I guarantee you won't be able to finish this without dying on your first try. Why? Because skill isn't taken into account, it's a memory game. You have to learn which pixels to not step on through pure trial and error. This isn't challenging, it's just difficult. Dark Souls, on the other hand, is fair, and dying isn't a part of the game that ever feels too frustrating because it's all a part of a system that rewards perseverance. You never realise it while you're playing, but these interlinking systems are all just about one thing: shaping you into a better player. Like a chunk of iron being forged into a sword, you're being taught to learn from your mistakes and fit into this unforgiving world where everything around you is against you. These stacking layers of game design all work in perfect unison, and they prepare you for the journey. As the bosses get harder, the trips back to the safe hub world of Majulaar become more relieving, and the feeling of accomplishment as you travel this apocalyptic land ever grows. Dark Souls 2 is a game very near and dear to my heart. I played it in a very rough patch of my life, and it sounds cheesy and cliche, but I learned a valuable lesson. No matter how rough things can get, or how stuck you might feel, eventually you'll reach that next bonfire. Thanks for attending this session of the Dead Game Society. I worked very hard on this video and I would really appreciate any support and criticism. I'm still trying to construct my own style, but I've already had a ton of great feedback on my previous videos, which I would definitely recommend watching if you haven't already. Thanks again for coming along, and this session is finally adjourned.